Many of you may be wondering what happened to all that promise of the salt mining from Conservative Home. And to you, I say there has been no outpouring of salt from Conservative Home in the wake of the local election. I've been quite surprised about that, quite frankly. There were a few, and we did cover them, but there was not the outcry, the pouring that we've seen previously, especially of course maybe after the last election, even the previous election before that general election. I just didn't see it. And there has been a few. Leicester, like they managed to win this one seat in Leicester East from an independent, and they're like, "Oh my god, look at us bucking the trend! Look at us bucking the trend!" You still lost all those seats. Not only that, under the unique circumstances from that seat in itself, it was hardly, shall we say, the most spectacular win, when the real story of the night was once again the complete and absolute collapse of their party. But still, of course, we have something interesting you for today. Because Joe Oxley, we've covered him before on here. He is talking now about, oh, we need to get over this like one-side infatuation with reform because it's really damaging our party, guys. They're still doing it. They are still going, should we reunite with reform? Should we not? Should we? Again, we've been through this time and time again when it comes to this, but they just can't seem to get over this decision, and they just need to pick a side. And those who say, yes, we should side reform, they should probably just go and join reform, which ultimately is what we saw happen in our local elections. Those who, of course, like, no, we're never going to do a pact with reform, are either A, going to probably stay in the Conservative Party, or have gone off to go join the Lib Dems because they're really not happy at the state of the party either, which again leads to more of the larger problems in the current Conservative Party, which again, hilarious and quite frankly funny to see, because it all goes back to, of course, really the 2015 European elections, where it all started, where it all really started to go wrong for them. And then, of course, 2016, the election of Boris Johnson, Partygate, the election of Liz Truss. Those are just like the big things, not even like some of the minor things. Like, we could talk about, austerity, all the problems that have. But anyway, going massively off target here. So back, of course, to this. So before we do continue on into diving into our main topic, please do remember to click the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the One Off Station link, Buy Me Coffee, which you will Buy Me Coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So John Oxley, the one-sided infatuation with the dream of a pact with reform is doing our party serious harm. So let's see what he's going to say about this. Anyone who has labored under the schoolboy crush knows the pain of unapproached feelings. For the worst afflicted, it deals now, of course, a double blow. Both the pain of rejection and, of course, the stasis of fantasy. Rather than, of course, accepting the realities of the situation and moving on, the moper now squanders other opportunities whilst waiting for his fantasies to come true. Now nearing, of course, its 200th anniversary, the Conservative Party should, of course, have grown up out of such things, yet it seems to be stuck in a one-way relationship with reform. What the Conservative Party should be doing, ironically, is what people like David Gauke and Rory Stewart have been saying, and I've talked about them before in this way. These two are like the heretics in the wilderness, but they are right. They have accurately depicted, got all the problems of the current Conservative Party, why it's going wrong, what they need to do to try and sort it out. But they are treated as like heretics, heresy, begone from this party. They're right. Trust me, in a couple of years, well, maybe even a bit longer than that, people will look back and say, those two were right. That's how you could have saved the party. But of course, it won't, because the party is just in a complete and absolute utter mess. It was just, I think, maybe this week, maybe last week, New European identified one of their key points, the fact that one of the big destroyers of the party was the party membership, where they were given like sole control over who gets to be leader. And yet they elected Boris Johnson, they elected Liz Truss, they elected Rishi, well, they didn't elect Rishi Sunak, they elected Kimmy Badnock. So yeah. All these problems in the Conservative Party need and should be addressed, but the party is just incapable of doing that because that would require some serious self-reflection. As we've said many times, they are incapable of doing that, and it's really shocking. So, back to this. With our party, of course, now struggling in the polls and Farage's outfit now surging, there is, of course, the obvious temptation to talk about uniting the right. And oh boy, have we seen that talked about ad nauseum. This whole idea that we can't ever win if the right vote is split, which again is right on that. They are right in pointing that out. But how do you unite the right? How do you go about doing that? No one's actually identified that. Just accept that there can't be two right-wing parties. That's about as far as they've got on this. And of course, they don't understand to the next part. Well, once you've united the right, how then do you win elections, especially when the centrist bloc is the biggest bloc of voters in the country? How on earth do you get them when you have quote successfully united the right on this block ticket to unite the right? How then do you attract those centrist voters to voting for you? You simply don't. They haven't figured that part out yet. It's insane. Honestly, the thinking or logic that goes on the right wing on sometimes is insane when you really think about it. But anyway, back to this. A glance, of course, at the numbers does suggest to us that us plus them would amount to, of course, an unassailable lead. Consequently, the talks, of course, the pacts and mergers abound. But would it, though? Would it, if there was a merger, would it result in that unassailable lead? No, it wouldn't, because there would be consequences if that were to happen. The moderates would, for example, would leave the party. Again, their biggest faction in the party. They're talking about chasing them away. Is that good news for the party? No, it's not. And again, you start to see the myriad of problems within the Conservative Party, just how bad it really is. And I always say this, just think back to 2019, where they were talking about, oh yeah, it's going to be a decade of Conservative rule. The 2025 general election, for Boris, it's going to be a doddle. That's what the kind of stuff they were talking about. And this is where we are in 2025. How quickly they have fallen apart. No one would have predicted this. No one would have predicted this. You'd have been called mad if you'd have time traveled back into 2019 after that general election and said, yeah, the next general election, the Tories are going to absolutely fall to pieces. You'd have been looked at like a madman. So the problem, of course, with that theory, it fails to, of course, withstand the contact with reality. Again, very true. At least he gets that part. And of course, on a deeper inspection, the Conservatives' counting on reform looks entirely at least one-sided, both among the voters and the leaders. Combining it seems to have very little benefit for the Tories. Across recent elections, a pattern is emerging that should be very alarming for the Conservative Party. In places where reform now looks to be the strongest horse, our voters are switching decisively behind them. That favour is, of course, not, however, being returned when Conservatives have the best chance. This creates a lose-lose situation for the Conservative candidate, which, again, you see that happen playing out quite a lot. In Runcorn, for example, the Tory voters appeared to shift their support behind the Reform candidate to replace the Labour MP. The Conservative vote share, of course, halved compared with, of course, last summer, where our candidates going now from a third place to the July, minus the drift now in May. The same, of course, repeated now in many Labour-held council areas, a precipitous drop now in Tory votes and the sudden rise of Reform winners. But it wasn't all going from the Conservatives. You've also got to factor in there was a lot of Labour people that switched to Reform as well on that. We can't discount that as well, but then again, coming from our heroes, he's probably not going to talk about that. But of course, this pattern would, of course, allow the right to challenge in areas it has, of course, never touched before. The problem is that it is not reciprocated in places where the Tories should be winning. In the last couple of weeks, the election results have now demonstrated this in detail. In Cheltenham and West Sussex, a pair of by-elections now saw strong Liberal Democrat defences. In both, the Conservatives were now prominent challengers, with a history of finishing in close second place. Rather than, of course, the right-wing votes now combining to win, however, it lost a large chunk of votes to Reform, and the Liberal Democrats romped home. And this is the thing they're not realising. They're losing in places where they should be strong, not to Reform, but to the Lib Dems. And I keep on saying this, the Lib Dems are their real problem. It's not Reform, it's the Lib Dems. And the Lib Dems are going to end up taking the traditional heartland of the Tories. And then when that happens, oh boy, are they in for a world of hurt. You think things are bad now? You think all the chaos you're seeing is bad now? Wait until that happens. Oh boy. Ed Davey is going to be absolutely rolling in it. I'll tell you that now. The match, of course, patterns from these local elections, where, of course, the Labour and the Lib Dems were able now to split the field between us and Reform. Tactical voting between Reform and the Conservative candidates only seems to go one way. Yep, very true. The broader now polling reinforces this trend. Conservative voters have a higher opinion of Reform and now more willingness to vote for them than vice versa. Our voters like Farage more than Reform voters like Kemi. And even then, if let's say this was Robert Jenrick, because the argument, of course, goes that if you had Robert Jenrick, this wouldn't be happening. He'd be challenging Farage. No, he still would just be doing like a Farage impression. He'd still be in as worse positions as Kemi Badenoch. And when he eventually takes over, probably within the year at this point, he's still not going to be any better than Kemi Badenoch. Yeah, he'll probably have a minor boost in the polls temporarily, but eventually he'll go back into doldrums. He's just as bad as Kemi Badenoch, just in different ways. And if, let's say, Jerick had won over Kemi, you'd get all the Kemi supporters going, "Oh, well, if we only had, Badenoch in, she'd be the one to be sticking it to Farage." They don't understand the position they're in, how bad it is. Jenrick is not going to help them out in any situation in either form or way. If he does bring out policy, that is going to open up the rifts again, which will cause division between the different Tory factions. Chaos erupts. There's bigger problems in the party than this. And yet you see people like this, they're not discussing those bigger problems. And I don't understand why. Whether it's a reluctance or even fear to do so, I don't know. And if this guy, John Oxley, did ever see this, I would love to speak to him. I would love to speak to one of these people and really ask them a couple of like their deep searching questions. Like, why aren't you addressing this? What about this? What about, questions they don't seem to be enjoy talking about or enjoy writing about, shall we say, in some cases. In a recent YouGov poll, at least 60% now of our current voters, just 38% of them, of our 2024 supporters, said that they thought Badenoch would now make a better prime minister than Farage. 80% now Reform voters were very loyal to their leader. On that very same question, many Conservatives are, of course, eyeing up the new party, but few are now, of course, glancing back, because a lot of people really think the Conservatives are dead. And sometimes momentum just builds, and that's end up what's killing the party. And they've done nothing new. They've done nothing to change. They will not look themselves in the mirror and admit faults and what really went wrong. And many faults are their own, and their belief in free market fundamentalist ideology, that if you keep on following that, it'll all go well. Now, they're still on that track. They just don't understand. They just don't understand fundamentally their own problems. If they did, would they still be in this position? Maybe it would be a bit better. I still think they'd be in a bad position, but it might be better. It might be better, at least, slightly. So, All of these data points point now a bigger problem for those of us now who want to urge a pact between us and reform. It proves that, of course, that voters are not Lego bricks that can easily be stacked together by parties. There is, of course, no guarantee that any attempt to unite the two parties would combine its both strengths. Again, very true, it wouldn't. An alliance or even merger may end up now being even less than the sum of the parts, as voters now refuse to be sort of a part of a new entity. Relying it, of course, questions the whole premise on the alliance. Based on the last election, a pact would see reform now step aside in all but the handful of seats that they would hold and a few dozen where they would come second to Labour. They would, per July of 2024, be the junior partner in any agreement. Yet, if their voters do not like the Tories and don't switch to them when it matters, as everything now suggests, this idea does not work for either party. Again, very true. Why are these Tories going to, or at least these reform voters, going to go vote Tory? We've discussed this before. They won't. Fundamentally, they won't. They do not think the Tories are a right wing party, which again shows you just how right wing and how bad things are going to go in reform. But anyway, there you go. Other videos for other topics. We've already done a few in the past couple of weeks. The Conservatives, of course, couldn't, of course, be sure about picking up any support, while Reform may not think that they need a deal at all. Indeed, by 2029, they may see it as association with us as a weakness rather than a strength. Reform, of course, already understand this, and it's showing, and it shows the telling. The unreciprocated relationship between the two parties, Farage is, of course, quite clear. He's far more interested in supplanting us than actually courting us. He wants to continue his march against the Conservative Party and then turn on the Labour Party. By the by-election results do suggest that he is now succeeding in this. His policy positions now increasingly demonstrate that he is interested in something different from the uniting the right. Which again, which is what you'll lot see of these people now want to say. Oh, we need to unite the right. We need to unite the right. You don't understand. If we just reunite the right, it'll all be fine. Will it, though? Will it? I don't think so on that one. Reform, of course, is not just some disaffected wing of the Conservative Party. It is a new phenomenon, more akin to the populist post-ideological parties on the European continent, such as Italy's Five Star Movement. Their position against the child benefit cap nods towards this. A party now of fear spreading, not fiscal restraint. Similarly, their enthusiasm now for nationalising water utilities points to another area of the state to take more control of. As much as Farage and co like to ape the mantle of Thatcherism, there is much of their economic platform that is pure populism, shrinking the state where they might think their voters like it, but pretending now to expand it now too massively. Without analysis of their broader economic policy, suggest it is now a boondoggle that fails now to add up. And it is. We actually got the IMF looked at Farage's new plan and went, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. That would be worse than Liz Truss's mini budget. You think that was bad an economic disaster? Yours would be even worse. And I'm really glad the IMF spoke up against that. Really glad that they did. And it got a lot of media attention as well. It is, of course, tempting to see the Conservatives and Reform now as a right-wing bloc that can at least come together should electoral circumstances make it advantageous. The public, however, doesn't seem to see them the same way, nor does Reform. In terms of both policy and appeal, which again, very true, they are aiming to be something different from us and to defeat and replace us. Failing now to draw distinctions between conservatism and reform will only enhance this by making the voters feel even more uncomfortable about lending their votes to which they will get nothing in return. The Conservative Party should not have a one-sided relationship with reform, nor should we try to position ourselves to be the diet reform alternative, which again, both Badnoch and Jarek would do. Farage and his colleagues now have a different complete worldview, different politics, and even different priorities. The voters now are sensing that. We should not be complacent about it. We should be trying to fight and defeat this insurgent party rather than trying to accommodate it. The voting patterns are now starting to show something very worrying. Not a united right, but a tactical switching that sees the Conservatives losing as voters every time. It's again very true. This is why I think the summer is going to be very, very difficult for Kemi Badnoch. Very difficult indeed. I honestly think within the year, Kemi Badnoch will not be leader of the Conservative Party. Will it be Robert Jenrick? Most likely. We'll see if anyone else decides to throw their hat in the ring, but it could be very interesting. Nonetheless, I hope it gets really, really messy. I really hope it does. I was hoping it was going to get messy last time they had a leadership contest. I hope this contest gets really messy this time. So rather than hoping for an alliance can be our resurrection, is essential to take the fight down to them. We need to beat now the clear alternative. Focus on beating reform should just be as we any other political opponent. Sitting and pining now for reform's popularity, of course, not be enough, nor hoping for any alliance which might never come to work. The results have already accumulated demonstratively the negatively of now viewing reform as a potential ally. Survival will only come from fighting them off. Can you fight them off? I don't think so. Most people in the comments don't seem um to have a very good view of that for sure on that one. So once again, conservatives hand wringing about the fact should we do this? Should we not do this? Should we do this? Should we not do this? Just make up your mind and do something about it. You know, Jesus. If you are, just go join reform. If you aren't, sort out the mess of your party. Like, take a seriously good long look at your party and sort it out. But at the moment, neither of those things seem to be happening. Well, one of them is, and it's not good for you. Not good news for you at all. But anyway, downfall of the Conservative Party. We'll be witnessing the complete end of one of the world's most famous and successful political parties. Looks like it. Looks like it. And I keep on saying this, we are witnessing something that does not happen very often in British politics, and that is the death of a political party. So we'll see what happens when it happens, but they still cannot make their mind up about what to do. Because they cannot make their mind up about what to do, it causes them to have other problems. And as I've said before, when the Tory party panics, it does not make good decisions at all. And the panic is now, oh boy, setting in ever more. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.